Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us. I'm thrilled to kick off our summer reset series today with Karen Dillon, best-selling author of How Will You Measure Your Life. Hi, Karen.
Hi, glad to be here.
How's everything going? How's your summer going so far? And where are you chatting with us from, if you don't mind sharing?
I am just outside of Boston, a town called Brookline, Massachusetts, and summer has been really busy but great. And as some of the rest of the people watching this may know, we're having a heat wave, so it's sort of we kicked into crazy overdrive in summer. But the summer has been great and filled with good stuff, busy stuff, but good stuff.
That's amazing. Yeah, we're feeling the heat wave here in New York City as well. It's not safe to go outside. So really glad to have you here with us today. And hello again to all of our attendees. If this is your first fireside chat, I'm Ronak Shet, the founder and CEO of Lit Videobooks. We make learning from best-selling books as fun and entertaining as watching a movie or a documentary. Karen, it was such a pleasure to collaborate with you on the video book for How Will You Measure Your Life. And I'm excited to dive into a conversation today about how we can redefine success on our own terms, which I think is a great topic for summer. Uh, for those of you who aren't sure what the summer reset is about, it's a light touch, summer schedule friendly way to connect with big ideas that should help us kind of reflect and rethink how we show up both in work and in life. And each month, we're going to feature one video book and the author and focus on themes like finding meaning and fulfillment, being present and resilient, and how we can expand our capacity to learn and grow. And during today's fireside chat, we're going to share questions with Karen much earlier than we normally do. It's usually a Q&A at the end. So if you haven't already, please check the Slido link in the chat and add questions. So we're going to be peppering them into the conversation throughout today. So Karen, before we dive in, I'd love to share a little bit about your background with everyone. So you were a former editor of Harvard Business Review and co-author of 3 books with the late Harvard Business School professor Clayton Christensen, including How Will You Measure Your Life, which we will be exploring in today's session. You also co-authored The Microstress Effect, which was named one of Thinker50's best management books. And just to add, you've also been recognized by Ashoka as one of the most influential and inspiring women in the world. So we are honored to have you with us. Anything you're currently working on that we didn't touch upon in the bio that you would like to share?
Nothing that I'm ready to talk about, but I always have things that I'm working on. So thank you for mentioning those. And yeah, I'm fueled by new ideas. And so that I have some ideas that I'm working on.
It's exciting. Excited to hear when you're ready to share. And Karen, this video book is very special as it honors the late Clayton Christensen. And could you tell us a little bit about your relationship with Clayton? We know he was an incredibly special person to you and many others.
Well, first of all, before I started working with Clay, I didn't really know him. I knew who he was. He really was one of the most revered business thinkers in the world. I think it was Forbes that called him the most influential business thinker or management thinker on the planet. And a thing that puts in perspective how powerful and influential he was that his book, The Innovator's Dilemma, which was his most famous book, which came up with the theory of disruptive innovation, was the only business book that Steve Jobs kept on his bookshelf. And I know Jeff Bezos is a fan too. So Clay is this sort of giant of thinking about innovation and leadership and management. But I only knew who he was through my role as the editor of Harvard Business Review. But until I decided that I wanted to work on an article with him, I didn't know him. So meeting him ended up being a huge inflection point in my life. So he started as stranger and he became, over the decade that we ended up collaborating together, a really wonderful friend and collaborator and partner. And any good words I can add to that would not even be close to adequately describing who he was and who he was in my life.
Well, I know we're going to talk a lot more about this, but maybe just to kind of like frame a little bit of today's conversation around the 3 questions that you had shared with us and our viewers. So uh, the first question, how consciously are you making decisions about your career based on what will truly motivate you in the long run? And when you make your career decisions, are you factoring in long-term happiness, or just focusing on new perks and benefits, maybe in the short or midterm? It's a really great question. For anyone that has a follow-up to this, please drop it in the chat. And we're going to be asking questions as we go today to keep the conversation fluid. I want to revisit a moment in the video book that gives a tangible way to how we're thinking about career choices. So maybe, Karen, while we're waiting for the audio to be fixed on this, could you maybe just talk to us a little bit about kind of short-term versus long-term thinking and how you approach this in your daily life?
Sure, sure. So let me just ground people a little bit and I was remembering what I said in the no audio video, maybe will trigger a little bit, but the work that I did with Clay, that was his work and I helped bring to the book, is based on improbably enough business theory, which sounds like the most boring thing to talk about in the world, but it's actually a very simple way to explain a deep understanding of what causes what to happen. And in this case, one of the theories that we talked about was how you make decisions about your career so that you'll be happy in the long run. And the reality for most of us is as we make decisions without meaning to, based only on things that we know will make us happy in the short term, right? When you look at two job prospects, for example, you might consider what title will sound most prestigious to my friends. Is it a promotion of some sort that I feel good talking about? Do I get perks and benefits? Is it a cool company? Those are all impressive. They're all things you put on your resume. And those are how most of us typically make decisions about our career. But those things in our findings in our business theory don't necessarily cause long-term happiness with your choices. That work comes from the decision about long-term versus short-term happiness in your career choices comes from a theory about what actually motivates people. And the idea is that there are two different scales that you need to satisfy to be happy in your career and your career choices in the long term. The short-term thinking, the ones that we just mentioned, are what we call hygiene factors, things that look good in your resume. You are happy to talk about at parties, etc. They make you happy, but they're not going to really motivate you over the long term. And the key thing is that the hygiene factors, the top of the scale, the best version of that is not dissatisfied. I am not dissatisfied with my hygiene factors. That does not necessarily mean I will be deeply satisfied with my career. It just means that you won't be dissatisfied, which is a good thing. But not being dissatisfied with your job or your career choices is not the same thing as being motivated to get out of bed every morning and enjoying what you do and seeing opportunities to grow and caring about that work. That's on a different scale, a scale we call intrinsic motivators. And those things are harder for people to see in the short term. They don't think about it as quickly. You think about the things that are written in the job offer letter, but not the things that might actually make the difference to your being motivated in the long run. And those are things like, am I given chances to grow? Do I believe in the mission of the organization? Do I respect and am I respected by my colleagues? There are things that if you don't stop to think about, will this job or this opportunity satisfy those things or not, may lead you to make choices that only make you happy for short periods of time, but not in the long run. So just thinking about both scales, you need to satisfy your hygiene factors, of course, but you also really want to be looking at maybe what's less visible to you in the short term, but will be more important to you in the long term, your intrinsic motivators.
Thank you. And I think I may have a way to play this clip. So we're going to try this one more time just to have the context here.
Christensen and his co-authors cited influential psychologist Frederick Hertzberg as one of the key figures who studied happiness and motivation in careers.
He suggested that the idea of motivation and happiness in our careers was not one continuous scale from dissatisfied to satisfied, but rather there were two separate scales that decided how happy we were going to be in our career. One he called hygiene factors and one he called intrinsic motivators. And they measured different things and they're both really important in our careers. So simple way to think about it is hygiene factors are the things that basically make your everyday life good. They're your job title, your salary, the prestige of your company, the things you would put on a resume or you would talk to people about at a cocktail party. The hygiene factors have to be decent for you not to be unhappy with your career. But not being unhappy with your career is the top of that scale. It's not that you're deeply happy with it. So the best case scenario is you're not unhappy, you're not dissatisfied. The other scale, which is more important in the long run and explains motivation, is what he called intrinsic motivators. And those are the things that are less tangible. You probably wouldn't put it on your resume, but they're very powerful reasons that you decide to get up every day and go into work. Am I respected by my colleagues and by my managers? Am I given opportunities to grow? Do I believe in the mission of this organization? Those things, those intrinsic motivators, are the difference between not being unhappy and being happy in your career. And hygiene factors are important, you have to have them, but they're not enough to make you happy. You have to have the intrinsic motivators. So when you think about teachers or people who work for NGOs, they're full of intrinsic motivators, and you hope to get the hygiene factors to be okay so that the intrinsic motivators can be the really powerful reason that they get out of bed and go into work every day.
Since this summer is kind of a time for us to slow down and reflect on how we can operate, and maybe make some changes, could you share how you approach decision making in your everyday life?
So I have learned over the years that I am quick to say yes to things and see only the positives. And as a result, I've tried to become more disciplined about making decisions, which can mean anything from, for example, in career choices. I actually instinctively did this, but I've started doing it formally. I will literally write down the list of things that are important to me. And then I will measure whatever that choice is against the things that I say are important to me. And it's not uncommon for there to be a mismatch. The thing that sounds most exciting is one of the things on the list, but there are a whole bunch of things that are missing from the list. And it allows me to be more disciplined in making choices that do meet or satisfy my intrinsic motivators. It's meant that I've made some choices in my professional life that may not be obvious to outsiders, but I know because I've really been thoughtful about doing the analysis, it's really high on my intrinsic motivators. So the work that I do now, they're all things I choose to do because I find them really intrinsically motivating. And that is just so energizing for me personally. So having some discipline to think about decisions against my own personal sense of intrinsic motivators versus hygiene factors is a really simple but powerful tool for me to make choices that I don't regret and that are taking me down a path that makes me happy in the long run. Again, life's too short to spend most of your waking hours, which is the reality of what for most of us. I think I read that we have 4,000 hours, 4,000 weeks in our life to be productive and get the things we want to get done. And if I map my age against how many weeks I have left in that, against that number, I want to make choices that are things I really care about. So being self-disciplined about those choices and having that framing that Clay gave us, that those set of lenses to make decisions becomes a really powerful and helpful tool.
That's really helpful. And I think it definitely is important to be able to say, okay, it's a crazy stat to think, okay, this is how many weeks we might have left, or this is how many hours or even days or seconds we might have left, and thinking about that ticking down when we're making decisions. So thank you for that. And we're gonna go to our Q&A a little bit to ask 2 questions from the audience. So one of the first questions here, do you have any prompts or habits for regularly checking in with yourself on alignment and purpose to kind of those intrinsic motivators?
I do actually, because as I said, I'm a shiny object person. Everything's interesting to me and I want to chase things. So I do have to somehow ground myself from time to time. And some of it just involves conversations with my family, with my husband and with my children, just to make sure I feel like I am staying true to the things that matter to me. Some of it is I'll call the gut check. When I wake up in the morning, you sort of know whether you're dreading the day or you are excited about the day. And I'm a really big believer in sleeping on things, sleeping on decisions, and seeing how you feel about that. And I think it's really healthy to do from time to time, just a personal assessment, right? These are the things that I thought would motivate me and make me happy, proving to be true. There's a tool we talk about in the book called discovery driven planning, which is work that came from Rita McGrath at Columbia, which Clay loved, which was when you're making decisions, write down what your assumptions are about what the outcome of those decisions is going to be. Just write them down, because for most of us, when we make decisions, we tend to retrofit our justification. We forget why we made the decision. Oh, maybe you initially thought this is going to give me a chance to grow, or this job will give me a chance to travel, or this job won't require me to travel, whatever it is. And we'll kind of forget that rationale that we had at the time, and then we'll just forget that that seemed important. If you actually literally write them down someplace, just for you personally, I am assuming that this work will energize me. I'm assuming that I will really enjoy collaborating with these people. I'm assuming I will learn new things. And then check in maybe every 6 months. Is this proving to be true? And if you find that a lot of it is proving to be true, you can course correct a little bit, maybe accept some imperfections, but you're on track. If you find that they don't match, that your assumptions and the reality don't match, it's time for a conversation with yourself or a conversation with your organization to see if you can get into better alignment. And I think that's just a really helpful self-check, is to do your own version of discovery-driven planning. Write down what you're assuming to be true so that you know how to measure whether or not it's happening in the long run.
Absolutely. Thank you. And another one here. Do you recommend having a coach or a value buddy, quote unquote, to find out what intrinsic motivators are actually driving you?
I think it's a great idea. I think too many of us are in our head and make assumptions about things, and I think it's really healthy. Even trying to explain how you're feeling to someone else who you trust and who you know, can maybe help you even form the right language for, why is this or is this not motivating me? It may not be the thing you think it is when you start to talk about it and explain it. So I think having a trusted, somebody in your network, a colleague, a sibling, a coach. I think those are all good things, because I think the reality is, one of the things we're all fighting with is that we all move so fast. Life moves so fast that we seldom take time to sort of check in with ourselves and see, are we on track? Are we doing the things we care about? We get things done. Our to-do list is overwhelming and we think about it in the middle of the night. If you don't stop and think about, am I understanding myself? Am I on track with the things that matter to me? You're just never going to be on track. It's just the reality. You're going to be responding to things rather than actively charting a path that makes you happy.
Well, that's really helpful, and I think summer potentially is a great time to do that, right? Take a beat and really kind of do that personal assessment you were thinking, or you were recommending, and take a step back. And maybe kind of just coming back to the theme here today, redefining success on our own terms. How do we think about career decisions as personal success? And how do we know if they are successful as personal successes? And then what happens if we realize that the career decisions are not really great for us personally?
Well, I'll start by reminding you what I just said about the 4,000 weeks, right? Life is really too short for a long time, be unhappy or just treading water in your career. So the goal should not be to just be okay, not dissatisfied. On the other hand, I will say, for most people, it's something we talk about in the book, certainly for young people, very few of us go out of college straight into the exact right career, exact right choices, make no false moves and get it perfect. And we're deeply motivated the whole time. It's very important to recognize that you have to learn about yourself and what will motivate you over time. And it's in the book, we talk about the fact that business theory tells us that strategy does not come down from the mountaintop on tablets and here's the perfect strategy for your company. All companies that have been successful with their strategy have had a kind of evolution of emergent strategy, there's opportunities they see and test and try and explore, and deliberate strategy when they believe they have the model right for their business and they need to sort of double down and go forward. That's true of our careers as well. So I think, to give people some context, it's okay if you're not perfectly happy at the moment and you need to make some switches and choices. Recognize that's normal, but try to be thoughtful as you're evolving your own thinking. Try to get to a better understanding. Even test yourself. Maybe the next job position is one that you think will make you happy. Write down your assumptions and then come back and ask yourself again, did this work for me? Is this making me happy? So I just think it's important to recognize there is no straight path to get to perfect happiness. Recognize it's a journey, but not thinking about how you are going to motivate yourself and be happy in the long run for all of those weeks and hours you're going to spend working is a mistake. So thinking about it is the first step towards finding the right path for you.
It's really helpful. And is there a balance between knowing, hey, I should keep trying, and maybe there's, light at the end of the tunnel here, versus, okay, I actually need to make a change and leave?
I mean, the practical part of me says you need to do the leave part carefully, and frequently, just as a lifelong manager, I've managed many people over my years. I often recognize that people are a little bit too quick to want to leave without ever having asked for what would make them happy or what would motivate them. I think it's a very healthy first step. You can't completely dictate your job. I'm not going to do this anymore. I only want to do this, but you can and should be able to have a conversation with your manager or peers, whatever the right level is, about things that you think will give you opportunities to grow. Most organizations will welcome someone raising their hand for that. They don't always have to be the glamorous assignments, but it's going to position you to learn and experiment. So I think it's really important before you get to that kind of fork in the road decision, this is no longer for me, I need to leave, is that you've done a lot to try to experiment, A, and B, learn what you can learn, because you can take that learning with you to the next position too. So I think it's a gut level. When do I really sort of dread getting up and going to work? But before you get to that point, I think there's a lot you can do to learn and prepare yourself for the next opportunity. And maybe it will work out that you actually end up loving something slightly different or some different responsibilities at your current organization.
Thanks, Karen. Yeah, and I think we're ready to move on to one of the second questions that you had posed to the audience for today. And to the group, please continue adding your questions in, and we're going to try to get to some of them during each of these questions and themes. So for the question that you posed to the audience today, how closely does your personal resource allocation match the strategy for your life? Do the choices you make about how to spend your time and energy every day match the things that are most important to you? Or are you just trying to keep up with the constant and immediate demands that are on you? So let's start with maybe part one of that question. So the strategy for your life. What strategy have you kind of put into place for your life? And I guess, do you have any tactics or suggestions for the audience about that?
So let me just explain what I mean by resource allocation, which sounds like, again, an abstract business concept, but it's one of the things that Clay and I talked about the first time we actually had a conversation about these ideas that really profoundly affected me. And it's at its core, it's a simple idea, is that for businesses, the strategy is not what the C-suite says it is and declares that our strategy this year is to become the X company in the world or whatever. The real strategy is formed, the reality of that, in the everyday decisions that all the employees make about how they will spend their time, their energy, and the company's resources. It's what's prioritized, what matters more than other things. What do I care about as an employee? That's where your strategy is formed. That's called the resource allocation process. Hopefully they're aligned. But in a lot of instances, they're not. What is declared to be the strategy is not the reality of the everyday choices that employees are making. And when you apply that to your life, it can be a very sobering question. If I asked you, what is the strategy for your life? First of all, a lot of people might not have thought of that. I think that's a powerful start. I don't know. What is the strategy for my life? When Clay and I talked about it, what really struck me like a thunderbolt was that I would have told you that the strategy for my life was to be a great mom and a great wife and a great sister and a great daughter, and that my friends and family were the most important thing in the world to me. And they were in my heart and in my mind. But if you looked at my personal resource allocation over the months, the weeks, even the years before that moment, I would recognize they are not aligned. I was so consumed with work, which I loved. It wasn't a negative thing. I loved what I did, but there's no way that anyone would have looked at how I spent my time, my energy, my resources and said, your family is the most important thing to you. That's the strategy for your life. And I recognized that I had to get them more in alignment. So the first thing that I would just say to people is start by asking yourself that question. Your answer will be different and personal. My answer won't be the same as yours, but do you know what the strategy for your life is? And then can you do a sort of quick self-assessment on how you're spending your time, your energy, your focus, and are they aligned? And I can tell you one of the single biggest changes I tried to make immediately with that realization was I recognized that I was not as fully present with the people I love most when I was with them, because I was so thinking about work and trying to multitask and get things done. And I thought it was more invisible than I recognized probably it was. It's funny now, but I had this little party trick where I could take my then BlackBerry, which was state of the art at the time, and I could leave it just at eye level on top of our sort of television console set. And in those days, when you had a new email, I can't remember if it went green or if it went red, there was a little button that lit up. And so I would be like, oh, I'm not looking at my phone, but I knew that I had just gotten an email. So I'd find the reason to get up and grab it and hit look. And I'm positive that those who love me would say, we absolutely knew you were not fully focused on us. So that was one of the first things that I changed. Even if it wasn't all the time. When I was with people, I really have tried to be truly present. That's a resource allocation. It's just my energy and my focus. I changed that. And I think just simply asking yourself that question is the first step to trying to get it more into alignment.
It's really helpful. And how did you kind of break out, like, how did you evaluate your time? Did you kind of say, just look at your calendar over kind of a week or a month and just kind of break out the activities into different buckets and see how you're kind of spending your time versus what your intentions are with kind of what is your strategy for life? Is that, how did you actually measure it? That might be helpful.
I honestly, it was just a gut level. I just knew. And I think everyone watching this will know too. How close are you
Yeah.
to being fully aligned? But the thing I've said to people that might be more practical than that, you can scan your calendar and just look at it. But all of our calendars, and I have an Outlook calendar, they're jammed all day long with things. And some of that you can't control. That is life in the modern world and being busy. But what you might look at that may be helpful for you, recognizing where you're actively making choices, is your discretionary choices of time. And I know most people choose to stay a little bit later at work or not, choose to be fully present in that conversation or not, choose to make plans and keep them on the weekend or not. There are choices we all make that signal what our strategy is because of the resource allocation we're making for ourselves. I think you can start by recognizing the times where it is truly discretionary. You're making a choice, and you're making a choice because it's easier, or the payoff from that choice is more obvious. For most of us, the investment in our career pays off more visibly and more obviously than the investment in our friends and family. Those are much longer term, in your long-term investment portfolio, friends and family are the longest return on your investment. You don't really know if you've been a good parent until your kids are out in the world and you see them as adults in their own right. That's a long investment. But I think starting to ask yourself about the choices you're making, that you do know, if you're being honest with yourself, it's a conversation with yourself, not public, that you are choosing something that's not really aligned with what you think is most important to you. I think that's a good start to seeing if you're really on track.
That's really helpful. And a few questions now from the audience. So, in a context of increasing volatility and uncertainty, how do you integrate factors beyond your control in your decision making?
I mean, it is hard, and the world moves so quickly, and all of us have to make a living, and we're not in control of, again, a dream career path is not possible for most people. I think you probably have to do some combination of not allowing yourself to just be passive about the things that happen to you. If things aren't making you happy, actively seeking some experiences, some opportunities that will add that to the mix. So you're not just fully consumed with things that you feel out of control and you're reacting all the time. It is a form of stress to feel like you're always just figuring out which balls can I drop. We're not in control of all of that. But I do think we're in more control than we think. For a lot of people, I say, look at we're all in a culture of we add things that we do it, and we add things, and I'll juggle that, and I can add that to it. We very seldom start from a blank page and say, okay, if I were rebuilding how I spend my time or the choices I'm making that I have some control over from scratch, are they all the same priorities? Can I take something off? Can I deprioritize something to reprioritize something else? I think just feeling some element of control is probably helpful. And I also think just word of advice from a person later in her years: live your life best you can below your means, so that you will never feel compelled to make choices purely for financial reasons. I think best you can prepare for that, best you can. It's not perfect, but trying to live a little bit below your means, it will give you a little bit of at least mental wiggle room to try to incorporate some of the things that make you happy, even if it takes you slightly off of the track that you're on now.
It's really insightful, and I love the advice on kind of living below your means. And one other question, do you feel that in this economy, and with the current state of society, it is harder for people to change careers, and change fields that they may have kind of historically worked in?
I think the younger generations, my own children included, will have multiple careers. I think that's just the reality of how people work and are expected to work and have opportunities to work. So I think there's a different mindset for younger people than my generation had coming straight out of college. I think they expect to and maybe even prepare for the possibility of different careers. And I think people accept that. So part of it, I think, is on us. Do we limit ourselves thinking it's impossible to change careers? Is it easy to change careers from dramatic change from A to B for everybody? Not necessarily, but it doesn't mean it's impossible. I know people who have become entrepreneurs after doing something completely different, and they really found their passion and they love what they do. I know people who have become consultants and love that version of their life because they're in control of their professional message and the time that they choose. I know someone who actually became a minister as a second career. I think it's entirely possible, but you have to, again, prepare and plan. And in every part of your life, you should be adding experiences and skills and things that might serve you for the other parts of your life that you want to explore. Even if you're not clear how you get from here to there, you can gain experiences that will help prepare you for whatever the next career opportunity it is that you want. And I think knowing it's possible and you have some control over it. Again, live below your means so you don't have to make financial decision about every career. You have the ability to think about how to go from A to B or A to C in a way that you can find a way to afford how to do.
Really, really insightful, and I hope everyone's getting a lot out of this. I know I am, and it's a great summer reset for me. Carrot, on to the third question that you had sent out. Do you know how you will measure your life? And do you know how at the end of your life you will measure if yours has been a life well lived? Very powerful thing to ask. And we're going to take a look at a clip from Clayton Christensen from the video book to help us understand a bit more about your point of view.
I would frame the question, how will I measure my life, in two ways. The first is there something that I can leave the world that is something bigger than me, that will help other people become better people? And the second one is, how will I measure whether I'm achieving that goal? And to me, that second measure, how to measure it, is just as important as the purpose of my life, and that is, how will I measure my life? And that made a big impact on the way I conduct my life, because every day I have to start the day thinking, well, if that's the way God is going to measure my life, I need to find today a person who I can help to become a better person. And that really has helped me be a much happier person than I ever had been before.
It's always so valuable to hear his voice. He has such a calm and collected demeanor, and just it's fascinating to hear from him still, and listen to so many of his learnings. I really love hearing from Clayton. He had powerful view on values and intentions. I know this is something that we all kind of try to incorporate into our lives, but often have distractions and obligations and just kind of get caught up in the day-to-day. How are you applying this idea of measuring your life to the way that you spend your time now?
First of all, hearing his voice was lovely. I used to describe him as a cross between Jimmy Stewart and my childhood minister. He just is soothing and so wise. And that question was really provocative to me personally. How will I measure my life? I don't know. I want to be a good person. None of us stop to think about that. But when you think about it, we measure everything now. I measure my steps. I measure my heart rate. We have devices that tell us all kinds of measurements about our lives every day. But taking a step back and even asking ourselves, just starting by asking that question, how will I measure my life? requires you to think about it. And I think, again, so few of us take time to think about something as lofty as that. But the answer, as he just talked about, can be found in your everyday choices. He was very clear about how he would measure his life. And it really was, he wanted to help people. And so I saw him make choices every day that were about helping people. That was for him. This really renowned, powerful, influential thinker was about something that was very simple, that every day could he help people. My answer will be different than yours, and all of our answers may change over time. But if you don't start to ask the question, you'll never have an answer. You'll never have an answer how you measure your life. And it's probably the most important thing you can ever measure. And I remember seeing somebody quoted saying something like, hell is finding the person that you could have been on your last day on earth, realizing that I'm not the person I wanted to be, and that's it. My life is over. And so thinking about the opportunity to be the person that you want to be by the choices you're making is just the first step to doing it. And for me personally, I was far enough along in my career to make some career choices, but it was recognizing that, again, time is so precious. I don't want to have regrets about the relationships that matter most to me. And I don't want to count on everybody always sort of excusing and accepting the times that I couldn't be present emotionally or physically, or the times when I was less than my best self as a sibling or a daughter or a spouse or a mother. I wanted to try to be the person I wanted to be. So I didn't have that hell on earth scenario at the end. And I just think asking yourself the question, it will take a lot of time for you to wrestle with your own answer, and it will be personal, and it will be only measured by you or whatever your religious beliefs are eventually. But asking yourself the question is the first step, I think, to starting to build a life that you want to have measured, and you'll be proud of how it's measured at the end.
It's really profound. And I'm definitely going to take some time to think through my answer. Maybe it's changed in the last few years. So how often do you reflect on this in terms of, your success compared to that measure? Has there been a time where you realized that, you were not kind of fulfilling the ultimate goal of how you wanted to measure your life? And how did you notice? And then if so, how did you pivot to kind of get back on track?
Well, the most dramatic time that I realized that was when I literally first met Clay and had our initial conversation about these questions. And I recognized in myself that I didn't like my answer. I didn't have a good one. It wasn't a terrible answer. I wasn't going to measure my life only by the pile of money, but I didn't like that I didn't have a good answer to that question. And I kind of knew. So starting to think about it caused me, after a year of having discussions with my family and the people I loved, that I wanted to pivot my career. I resigned as the editor of Harvard Business Review with goodwill on both sides, and I refocused for a couple years on my family. I continued to work. I ended up working with Clay, and we worked on the beginning of our 10 years of collaboration together. But I, for example, wanted my kids to see that when mom works, it's because it's something that matters to her and is motivating, and that you can get joy from your work, and not to see them as an active choice that I was making. So I literally made a kind of dramatic, I disrupted my life, in Clay's language, in a way that allowed me to rebuild it so that it was much more purposeful. And I hope that even in that switch, as dramatic as it was, what came out on the other end was a life that more matched the things that I really did want to measure my life in the long run. But we all fall short all the time, week to week, month to month. I start to drift into, again, my shiny object syndrome. Things are just really interesting to me. Every idea is interesting to me. I like collaborating with everybody. I want to say yes to everything. And sometimes taking a step back and recognizing that I need to just recalibrate a little bit. I don't need to do what I did, dramatic change, but I need to recalibrate and prioritize the things, or reprioritize the things that fill all those buckets for me, or intrinsically motivating, or my resource allocations align with the strategy for my life, and is something that is just meaningful to me in the long run. And having people to keep you honest about it. My family are my most trusted source of that. But for anyone, I think having someone to talk to and hold you accountable to. I think we measure what we track, right? If we succeed at what we measure, and if we don't track it, we'll never know how we're doing. So having something what gets measured gets done. Having something to measure, or at least start to try to measure, is a good way to hold yourself accountable. Again, you're not pleasing anybody but yourself. That's the goal of this. It's your answer is very personal to you. But if you're not even being honest with yourself, then you're never going to get to the point where you personally are happy with how you're going to measure your life in the long run.
Thanks again, Karen. And we're going to take the last few minutes here to try to answer some questions from the audience. So the first one here, what is your approach as we often need to spend more time on health as we age, which means less time for other meaningful pursuits?
Well, I would start by telling you, don't assume that they're mutually exclusive. You can find ways to work on your health with the people that you care about. So for example, even during the pandemic, I recognized that a couple of my really close friends from college who lived within an hour of me, we had sort of lost day-to-day touch in a way. Nothing bad happened, but we just got consumed with our own lives. In the pandemic, for many of us, it felt more important than ever to reconnect with the people that you cared most about. We started finding ways to walk together. So we would meet at some neutral place and we'd have a 5-mile walk, and it was conversation. It was good for us both mentally and physically. And it was reconnecting our relationship in a really important way. So yes, your health, you have nothing if you don't have your health. That's essential. And you don't have to do it with other people, but you can find ways to combine it. My husband and I started walking during the pandemic as well every day. And now it's become just a go-to part of our day where we debrief and unwind and laugh. And it's just become a really important part of our relationship. So I think look for twofers, look for ways where your health can be part of something that connects you with other people in whatever way works for you. And I think you'll find that it's mutually beneficial and it reinforces both things.
And health is also very measurable now, which
It
is
is. It is.
great.
Again, just look at your watch and you'll know how you're doing.
Exactly. So another question, how do you integrate factors such as AI in the analysis regarding a career move or change? Maybe touching upon kind of how AI might impact jobs and kind of lead to, your desire to kind of transition into a different role.
It's a giant question because I'm not sure anywhere close to an expert, but I find it fascinating and warp speed how AI is changing the way we think about the way things are possible, what we individually will do and won't do. The thing I would just think about is even in a world of AI, where do you, human being you, add value that maybe AI can't, right? There's judgment, there's experience, there's ability to communicate with others. You'll have to learn and harness AI as a tool in some way in your life, certainly in your professional life. I would sort of run toward it, but also figure out, so where do I personally add value beyond that and focus on getting the experiences that can help enhance that rather than make you competing with AI, because ultimately we're not going to win with AI in a head-to-head competition. But where's the human part of you that's going to matter more in the long run? But it is fascinating. It's going to make career changes more possible. It's going to make them happen maybe when you didn't necessarily even want it. Jobs will be replaced by AI, but seek the value that you uniquely can bring. And I think you'll find some ways to distinguish yourself even in an AI dominated world.
Absolutely. Yeah, I recently heard something where, there's so many things that happen because of the internet and new jobs that were created that you wouldn't have thought of, like, SEO optimization or, iOS engineer, right? Like these things didn't really exist until mobile and the internet. And so hopefully that is part of what happens here with the AI innovation as well.
I've heard a really interesting thing from others who are AI experts that each generation has a different use for AI. My generation uses it as like a super Google. It's a better search, and it's true. I do that. But as the younger generations who are kind of going to be native AI people are going to use it creatively in ways that I probably can't even begin to imagine. So for me, it would be experimenting and challenging all your thinking about what AI can do for you, what it can help you be or create is a whole different way of thinking than mine's a better Google search than I could do on my own. So I think the potential power, catalytic power to change your career could be very exciting, and for you to have more control over it in some way, because you might be able to create the position or the job or the career that you want, because that becomes a really great tool for you.
That's really interesting. And I haven't thought about it generationally. And maybe it also opens up more time for us to be able to focus on the things we really want to measure our life by, right? If it can kind of hopefully do a lot of the tasks that we don't really want to do anyways.
That's a great point. That's a great point. That
Hopefully.
finding more time in your day is so valuable. And if AI helps you do that, I would definitely take it and run and redirect your energy to something that matters to you more.
Any advice for those who have realized they're not in the career they want to be. It does not suit their personality, and they're a little bit lost right now about kind of what to do and how to take the next step to kind of make a transition.
So it is, that's a hard thing to do, but, and I, again, advise you to do it slowly. Don't make a dramatic choice. I just think it's never good, unless it's really an unsafe environment. I think it's never a good choice to kind of quit in a moment of relief or anger or whatever, and then suddenly you're looking at a blank, path ahead of you. I would try to, maybe it's your discovery driven planning process. What are you thinking? Start to have conversations with people. What are you thinking might make you happy, or experiences that might be interesting to you? Go on a path of emergent strategy. Look for experiences and to explore things and to try to gain some skills that you think may end up suiting you more or making you happier, and experiment so that you can sort of begin to experiment before you're in the position of needing to make a dramatic change. So I would do it carefully. But I think having a plan, you can survive imperfect work if you kind of have a plan for how and when you're going to try to transition yourself to the next thing. So take steps to get you there so you don't feel powerless, but craft a plan so you're not just, jumping out of the plane without a parachute. Get your parachute ready.
I like that. So don't just, immediately, was it scorched earth?
Definitely not scorched earth. And the
Not
other thing I
scorched
would
earth.
do, just career advice I would give to people, is if you are making assumptions about what you think is going to make you happy, try to connect with people who do that. Ask them for informational interviews. Go link in with them on LinkedIn, or work your network to say, could I talk to someone who is a creative director of a website or whatever, just so you can understand, what is the job really like? What skills do they need? Would they be willing to talk to you from time to time as you're going on your path? You have to work at it, right? It's not, again, another thing that's not going to come down from the mountaintop written in a tablet is what will make me happy. You have to work at it, but I would explore that, and I would work hard at trying to actively figure that out, so that you're not passively waiting for this magnificent thing to come and happen to you and you say yes to. You are having some agency, some control over how you're exploring it. And I think you'll find many people are happy to help. If you're not asking too much of them, you're not asking them to, create a job for you, but just like, how did you get to your path? What skills do you think are most important? What do you think is going to change about your job in an AI world? Those are conversations most people are usually happy to have. As I usually tell my kids, most people are happy to talk about themselves. It's a good way to get a conversation started. And if you are genuinely interested in those people, you'll probably have a productive conversation.
That's great advice. And another question here, that's maybe less personal and more for companies. So do you have any kind of guidance around if companies should be helping their employees find purpose in any sort of meaningful way? Have you seen any companies kind of do this particularly well, or is it kind of really meant to be more of a personal introspection, without really kind of the guidance of the company?
I think it's actually really important for companies to think about it, because having the best talent and developing and keeping the best talent at an age when burnout is happening so quickly, I think it would be foolish for a company not to think about this. One thing I tell people from my other work on microstress, is that a lot of people think purpose has to be this very lofty thing, right? I'm going to cure cancer. I'm going to raise $1 million for this charity. I'm going to change the education system. Those are super worthy goals, but most of us are not going to be able to do that in our lifetime. Purpose can also be found in everyday life and everyday acts. And if you're not looking for it, and you're not getting a sense of being able to execute something that fulfills your purpose in everyday life, you'll never do it. You'll never find it. But we know that the correlation between having a sense of purpose, even the small everyday acts, and basically your long-term happiness is really clear. So for organizations to talk about it, to have people have individual conversations with their manager, do you have a sense of purpose in your work here? What could we do to help you find it or experiment with it? It can be as simple as, do you get assigned or volunteer to be a mentor to someone at your organization? For me, that was always a really powerful sense of purpose. It was invisible to the rest of the world, but I loved having that opportunity to do that. Do I believe in what we're doing? Am I really really helping, could I even could we connect our employees directly with some customers so they can see how the work that they do down the line actually makes people's lives better? I think it would be wise for organizations to have some level of conversation, not necessarily about the cure cancer level of purpose, but how can we find purpose in our work together and our collaboration? You can find purpose in collaborating with people and building on each other's ideas, making an idea better and stronger. If you're not looking for it, you won't find it. And I think an organization should think about that dimension of people's jobs to attract, retain, and keep the best people. I think that's important in the long run for any organization.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people in the audience will definitely, as HR and learning leaders, will definitely resonate with that. So thank you for that. And I guess this is a good question to kind of wrap things up. So are there any kind of additional books or resources that you would recommend on kind of helping find value and motivations and kind of just helping think through kind of defining success, right? Anything that you follow regularly that you find really helpful as a content resource?
So a relatively recent book, maybe a couple years old, is called The Good Life by Robert Waldinger and a co-author's name I'm forgetting. The Good Life is a representation of what's known as the Grant Study, which is the longest longitudinal study of Harvard graduates. I think it's past 85 years now, where they have determined what are the single biggest determinants of long-term happiness. And they did the Harvard graduates compared to Boston's public school kids. And they have, over all of these years of studying this question, what are the single biggest determinants of long-term happiness? They have concluded it's one simple thing, one very clear thing, which is warm personal relationships, that your relationships are the most important thing to determine your long-term happiness, not career success, not money, not even health, but the connection you have with other people is so important. And The Good Life is the most current version of that thinking and that work. I think it's a really powerful reminder of how important it is to allocate some of your time and energy for the relationships in your life, and not just your immediate family. But I find that for most of us, as every decade of our life passes, in our 20s, our 30s, our 40s, our 50s, our lives get smaller, our worlds get smaller because we have so much to do. We're so busy with work and our family commitments are enormous. And we sort of let go of the other relationships that were once very important to us, like me with my college friends. We just let them lag behind. And I think it's really important to nurture those over the long run, because we know that connection with other individuals, other people that we care about, is literally going to make you happy, and it's literally going to be good for your health. Being lonely is as deadly to you in the long run as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. There's been a lot of research on that. So recognizing that it's really helpful to you and important, I would say crucial, to make sure you're committing some of your time and energy and resources to relationships beyond the immediate day-to-day relationships in your life.
Wonderful book recommendation, and such a great note to kind of wrap up the conversation. Thanks so much, Karen, for answering everyone's questions and sharing your advice and guidance. Is there one thing you want folks to take away today and maybe try to apply to their lives as they kind of go into summer?
I would just say you have more control over your happiness than it might seem sometimes. So many of us are used to just surviving and responding and keeping our heads above water. I think recognize that you can make even some small changes in your life that are going to make you happier in the long run. And again, will help you guide you towards the answer to your own question, how we measure your life. I think recognizing you can do that and starting to make a couple of changes will go a really long way. So I just encourage you to think about it. Think about all the questions we've talked about today and pick one or two things to do differently and see how it feels. And I promise you it will feel good in the long run.
Well, really appreciate it, Karen. And it's been a pleasure to have you here with us today. Thank you to all of our attendees. And just a quick housekeeping item. Just make sure to check out your Zoom confirmation email to redeem your copy of Karen's video book so you can watch all of How Will You Measure Your Life. And our next two fireside chats in the summer series are with Mark Nepo, the author of the Book of Awakening, and Joe Bowler, the author of Limitless Mind. So just keep an eye out for those invitations. And I hope everyone has a great rest of the week. Thanks so much.
Thank you.